Hey everyone, welcome to YouTube Live on Friday afternoon. If you're just signing in, please let me know where you're calling in from, what your name is, and we're going to be talking about, I'm just recognizing that my video is not properly titled right now, so not cold climate and soils. I'm just going to edit that and change the title there, but we're going to be talking about food and ethics. So this is potentially a heated conversation, although it doesn't need to be. Food and ethics is something that I find comes up in a lot of our programs, and it's one that I wanted to directly address just because it comes up a lot. And I think there's a lot of misinformation around ethics and food, and typically, ethics can span many different domains. It can be, focused in around whether animals feel or don't feel. I believe that they feel, that they have emotions, that they feel pain, they feel pleasure. It can be around, how our farming removes or potentially removes ecology, depending on how it's done. It can be around access to food. And so primarily what I wanted to address in this topic, however, I'm completely open to having a conversation about this because it is such a vast topic, comes around sentience. And it's not an easy topic to talk about, to be totally honest with you, because it's tough. I mean, I'm an omnivore. I take responsibility for taking life in order to consume meat. But one of the biggest insights that I've had in the last couple of, at least the last decade, is that there's pretty good evidence that indicates that plants, trees, shrubs, all have a form of sentience as well. In fact, some of the research in microbiology indicates that microbes even have a certain level of intelligence as well. And so this idea that we can delineate plants from animals and that somehow, just consuming plants somehow absolves us of not consuming sentient beings, I think is not correct. And so there's two main resources that I wanted to talk about today. And I'll put that up in a slide here shortly, which shows some of the research that I've read in the last year around the sentience of plants, or basically life on Earth that's not in the Animalia kingdom or fauna. So I think that it's important when we're making dietary choices not to get caught down this rabbit hole of, what we're killing versus not killing. Life requires death. Death is a prerequisite for life. And we happen to live at, the top or close to the top of the food chain. And so getting comfortable with where we exist in that food chain means that we have to face these topics head on. Every year I harvest my own chickens. I have been responsible for harvesting my own beef and my own lamb, and it's never easy. I think that for the people that do find it easy, either they've done it too many times or they haven't really spent enough time inside looking in at what's involved in being alive and, the taking of life. But, I don't make any differentiation between killing a cow or a chicken or a lamb and cutting down a tree. Yet most people will be totally fine with cutting a tree down. They won't even think twice about it. It's just, a big giant plant that has no feelings. But in fact, that's not actually the case at all. In fact, there's a really great book that I'm going to bring up here right away, named, I think it's called The Hidden Life of Trees or The Secret Life of Trees by Peter Walbin. And they've actually heard trees scream, as crazy as that sounds. They can tell that trees communicate with each other. They talk to each other. They know that communities of plants have the ability to send messages through fungal networks in the soil to warn each other of impending pests or dangers, so that these plants can actually prepare for whatever happens to be coming down the pike for them. So I think it's really important that if you do make the decision to eat in a specific way, that you're not fooling yourself into believing that just consuming leaves or fruits or nuts, that somehow you're not consuming creatures that are sentient. And I think, like, not to be too glib about it, but you know, that movie Avatar, I think the more I think about that movie, the more it was just talking about planet Earth. They just put it into a far off place and made it science fiction so that people could consume it. But what if the world that we exist in right now is that connected, and everything that we're surrounded by actually has that level of connection and sentience, and that we're just privileged to be here. And it just so happens that our job is, one of our jobs is to responsibly manage the ecosystems that we depend on. So anyhow, if you're just coming in, put your name up into the chat window. Let us know where you're calling in from. If you've got an opinion on ethics and eating, I'd love to see it up there in the chat window as well. Let me know where you're coming from. And we can have a conversation about why you've chosen to eat in the way that you eat. What are the ethical considerations that you've made with regards to your eating habits, and why have you made them? I'd be interested to know that. We're not going to make this into a long show. I only have one slide that I want to talk to, and I really just wanted to be able to connect with you guys and have a conversation about ethics and kind of get a sense of where people are at with regards to their own ethical decisions around food. So by all means, throw that up in the chat window. Hey, Kirk, nice to see you, man. Nice that you could join us today. Freegan Dave Hartman, howdy from Montana. Awesome. Glad to have you on, Freegan Dave. Brennis Narain, or Morgan calling from Maryland. Welcome, Morgan. Awesome to have you. Okay, folks, so I'm going to share my screen. I've got one slide to share with you guys today. We'll have a quick conversation, and if you guys want to make it a longer conversation, I have the time, but it's entirely up to you guys. It's going to be a shorter live stream than normal, unless you guys choose to make it a bit longer. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So I wanted to just bring up these two guys. There's lots more. There are a lot more people that have looked into this topic beyond these two guys, but you'll probably recognize one of them for sure. Paul Stamets is on the left, and he's written a bunch of books on fungi. And I'm pretty sure that if you read between the lines, and I mean, sometimes Paul even comes straight out and says it, that I think he's actually quoted as even saying that he's learned more from fungi directly, not through observing them, but through consuming psilocybin mushrooms and various other approaches. In fact, I think there was one show I was watching with him recently where he was on the Joe Rogan show, and he basically said that by consuming psilocybin mushrooms, they gave him the power to look into the future. And so, you know, Paul Stamets would definitely be one of these people out there that would believe that all life is sentient and has a place. He's a really interesting guy, and I'm curious if anybody on this that are signing in today have read his book, Mycelium Running. Mycelium Running is an incredible book. I recommend it to all of my permaculture design students. It's probably one of the most optimistic books that I've read in a long time, and I'm actually due to read it again. It's full of great techniques on what you can do with fungi, how you can remediate land, how you grow it in both high tech and low tech ways. And it really is the internet of the soil. It's what connects all the different forms of plant life, especially in forest floors, but you can get fungi in almost any ecosystem. So again, it's easy to look at something like a mushroom and say, well, it's not sentient, it's just kind of standing there and doing its thing. But there's an incredible amount of complexity when it comes to fungi. Peter Walben wrote The Hidden Life of Trees, and this is one of the more recent books that I've read. You can get this on Audible and as a hard copy as well. And this guy's a forester from Germany and has essentially made the same claim. He's that trees, basically there are mothers and there are daughters and sons. They live in communities. They travel, but obviously their version of traveling is different than ours. It takes thousands and thousands of years. Both of these guys have done research on how older trees will actually support younger trees by shuttling sugars through fungal networks to the younger ones, so that when the older one dies, that they have a successionary plan. They are absolutely planning, they're thinking, they're feeling. Both of these guys have documented extensively in the work that they've done. And so I also highly recommend Peter Walben's book. One of the coolest things about Peter Walben is that his book has been on the New York bestsellers list for a very long period of time, which is neat that the general population is starting to think about things like sentience in trees and how trees work. And, really, really great book, and really exciting to see that the world is starting to wake up to the fact that we probably do live in an avatar type world. So I'm sure that if you talk to any, livestock farmer, that one of the hardest days of their life every year is when they actually have to take their animals to market. It's not an easy task. But I guess what I'm trying to get across here is that if you're a livestock farmer and you're growing livestock for the production of protein, and you're harvesting those animals every single year, you're not killing any less than a vegan or vegetarian. That's the crux of it. I want you to think a little bit about that, because that's a big statement. So if you're eating a diet that's primarily grains and beans and vegetables that are grown from far away, in order for those plants to have been grown, it requires the monoculture production of those plants in a far off place, which meant that the ecosystem that once had a diverse system living there was mineralized. It was brought down. It was turned into dust, essentially, so that we could run tractors over these fields and farm them. Eating soy burgers is no less destructive than eating beef burgers if the beef is being raised properly. A lot of people get really confused and conflate the issues around the production of meat by saying, well, cows need to eat grain and they need to eat soy and they need to eat all these things. And the truth is that they don't. We've been trying to breed animals that fatten up quicker, that have certain fat characteristics. And we do that by feeding them in feedlots food that they're not meant to be eating. The truth is that if we actually wanted to reverse climate change tomorrow, we would eliminate the majority of corn, soy, wheat, cotton in the United States and even around the world. And we would return that land back to grass. We'd return it back to polycultural grass systems, because that's the thing that will sequester the most amount of water, the most amount of carbon dioxide. And it's not like we're just going to turn it back to grass and do anything with it. We can actually turn it back to grass. We can plant it out to a silviculture system, so we can use a combination of trees and shrubs. These trees and shrubs can also act as food forests, or they can create fuel or additional fodder. There's all sorts of functions. We can create bee fodder for it, so it can be byproducts can include honey. I mean, there's no end to the type of productivity that we can put into these systems. And then we can graze them in between with pigs, cows, chickens, sheep, goats, depending on, your bioregion and what, does really well there. And so we can actually have our cake and eat it too. And so in replacing these lands back to grasslands and silviculture lands, what's really great about that is that now we're not just growing cows, pigs, chickens, sheep, goats, bees, but we're also creating space for all the wild birds to come back. We're creating space for all the wild animals, the deer and the moose and the elk, and all the other wild species that can co-live in farming systems that are not based in chemicals, massive tractors, and massive disturbance. And so the thing is that most vegan and vegetarian-based farming systems, or let me say it a different way, the farming systems that vegans and vegetarians depend on, which is monoculture, broad acre, grain and legume production, are highly ecologically destructive. And if you don't believe me, I highly recommend you go and do some research, because these are the facts. Now, there are a couple caveats to that statement. And one of them is that if you live in the subtropics or the tropics, then living a vegan and vegetarian diet might actually be an ethical choice. But if you live, north of that, and you're relying on annual monocultures that are taking up space that was formerly grassland or forest, or some variant thereof, those systems are no less destructive, and they are no less killing, or they actually probably kill far more species and animals and microbes and even native plants than sustainable grass and silviculture type systems. And that is where humanity has got to move. We've got to move back to perennial agriculture. We've got to move back to perennial based systems. I just wrote a blog today, which I'm half tempted to read to you guys. It's not quite published, but it's called the Top 3 Existential Threats to the Global Food System. And it's kind of a sidestep to this conversation, but it's going to be out on Medium here a little bit later this afternoon. And it really gets to the heart of this. I mean, the vegetarian and vegan-based diet, which is being promoted through Hollywood, is not going to be possible in less than 20 years, and maybe even shorter than that. I mean, the Ogallala Aquifer right now is on its last legs. This is the largest aquifer in North America. It's in the top aquifers globally. And this is the primary reason that the Midwest is able to grow all these grain crops through the consumption of fossil water that is pumped out of the ground in order to irrigate these massive pivots. So we have got to move back into polycultural systems that have the ability to move through droughts, through wet periods. They basically have these plants, these polycultures have insurance policies that allow them to adapt to different climatic regimes year to year. And that's really, really crucial for the survival of the human species, for the survival of all the other species on the planet, and for the cleaning of our air and our water, and even for the nutrient density of the food that we consume. So a couple of comments here. Frankie says, hi. Hey, Frankie, how's it going? Nice to see you. Brett Castaldo, Mycelium Running by Paul Stamets. I've read it and then reread it. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Brett. It's a great, great book. And Brett says he just picked up The Hidden Life of Trees as well. It's an awesome book, Brett. I'd love to get your opinion on it. Let me know what you think. Bernice Narain, I just ordered Hidden Life of Trees from Amazon. Can't wait to read it. Yeah, it's a great book, Bernice. So let me know what you think of it. So I'm curious, where do you guys stand on this issue? What do you think about food and ethics? And what are the top things that come up for you guys as a result of talking about this subject? Where do you stand on food and ethics? Just put it up into the chat window. If you're just coming into the YouTube video, we're talking about food and ethics today. Let us know where you're calling in from, what your name is, and what you think about food and ethics. Pretty quiet on the chat window there, guys. You guys are probably all tired after a long Friday at work. I know I'm looking forward to the weekend. I've had a really great week, but definitely I'm feeling a little bit tired at the end of the week. Grow my own meat. So friggin' Dave Hartman says, grow my own meat or hunt and grab roadkill. Awesome. Brennis, I did not always respect the trees. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't respect the trees, but these things are amazing. They are longer lived than us, you know, and yet we'll cut them down like they're nothing. It's crazy. In fact, this weekend I'm going up to my mother-in-law's cabin, and unfortunately the county just clear cut the entire forest. It's crazy. I'm probably going to do a YouTube video on it. So if you're watching my channel, you'll see a video on the clear cutting of the forest around the lake that we go to on a regular basis. Frankie, I agree with the polyculture. Now having to relearn this diet scheme all over again. Perennial garden is the way to go. Absolutely. And Frankie, you know, as you move further south, you're talking about going to Texas. I mean, you might be able to continue to live a vegetarian diet in Texas. It's pretty warm down there. I am speaking, of course, with my context in mind and where I live and the northern colder climates. Brenda says, I had them removed to my liking. Fair enough. Absolutely. They've got the power to heal. Yeah, there's all sorts of amazing things about trees. Oh, Nevada. Okay, whereabouts in Nevada, Frankie? Brennis talks about you have to build a relationship with them, talk to them, and hug them. Interesting. I'd like to learn more about that, Brennis. All right, folks. Well, I guess we don't have the kind of heated conversation that I was expecting to have around this issue, which is unfortunate because not that I wanted to have an argument or anything, but I did want to get people's take on the ethics of food. And I've kind of told you where I stand. I think that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and pretending that, you know, you can just eat plants and absolve yourself of having a no blood on your hands is a false sense of security. We create a disturbance as humans. We don't have a choice in that matter. What we can do, because not all disturbance is negative, what we can do is we can optimize that disturbance. And so instead of being less bad, we can be more positive. And that's the thing that I think is really important that most people forget is people don't realize that we can be a force of creation. We can be a force of optimism and positivity. And one of the easiest ways that we can do that is by making better dietary choices and getting clear on what this ethics issue actually means. So, folks, I'm going to make this a really short video. It's been about a half an hour. It's been wonderful chatting with you guys. If you have specific videos you want me to make about permaculture, about diet, about any of these issues, please put them into my chat window or email me directly. I'd love to make custom videos. And I really just appreciate all of you guys showing up today. It's been great. I know your time is super valuable. And I appreciate all the likes that I get down there and all the shares and how you guys have really helped to lift this channel up. It's been wonderful. We'll be live again next week, Wednesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, talking about permaculture, water, specifically urban permaculture and water. So if you've been signing into our Wednesday evenings, those are going to continue on. I think I have one more show to go for the diet stuff next Friday, and then we're going to start a whole new series of videos, which will be announced sometime next week. So have an incredible weekend, guys. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all again real soon, and we'll talk to you guys next week at the very least. Okay, have a wonderful weekend.